for shaping global discourse on sustainability and climate action, bringing together leaders, thinkers, and change makers from across the world. My name is Apurva Singh. I'm a research associate at the Energy and Resources Institute, and it is my privilege to serve as your MC for this plenary session. The urgency for transformative action has never been clearer. The first global stocktake shows that global emissions must fall by 43% by 2030 to stay within the temperature goals. Meanwhile, only 35% of SDG targets are on track, with many slowing and some reversing. Incremental change is no longer sufficient. The interconnected challenges of climate, development, equity, and resilience demand systemic shifts, long-term vision, and leadership that can deliver transformation at scale. Before we proceed with this session, I want to take a moment to share something very powerful. This year, in partnership with Cool the Globe, we can all take real climate action right here, right now. Download the Cool the Globe app for free and join the WSDS community and complete simple, sustainable tasks during the summit. The top 10 participants on the leaderboard will be recognized as the most sustainable delegates. Together, let us truly walk the talk. Thank you. We have a fantastic line of speakers for this leadership panel on greening manufacturing and trade. The session will explore how green manufacturing and sustainable trade can reshape global value chains. It shall also examine the pathways for the global south to lead equitable transitions through innovation, circularity, and resilient industrial ecosystems. It is my pleasure to introduce the moderator for this session, Ms. Seema Paul, Program Director India at the Sequoia Climate Foundation. Can you please have a huge round of applause for Ms. Seema Paul? As outlined in the agenda, the session will begin with brief framing remarks by the chair, followed by keynote interventions from all our distinguished panelists. We will then move on to a moderated discussion amongst the speakers. With that, may I invite Ms. Paul to take over and introduce all our speakers. Over to you, ma'am.
Hello and welcome, friends. It's really an honor to be participating in the Silver Jubilee World Sustainable Development Summit, a summit that has really emerged as one of the most significant global convenings on this issue across the world. The topic for our panel, as already mentioned, is green manufacturing and trade. And many of us in the room might know that developing economies have always seen industrial policy and the role of state in advancing industry as a key part of their developmental agenda. What's new, however, is that in the last few years, industrial policy has emerged as an area in which countries of the North also see merit. As all countries go through energy transition, no matter at what pace, they are trying to address the common challenge of climate change as well as the development goals. And in this context, they have started to see the importance of leveraging clean energy for their developmental goals. This is not the same as building insular economies, their efforts to leverage the green manufacturing chains for their countries. It's not about insularity. Interdependence is still key. It is still inevitable. In fact, no single country can or should be doing any sort of manufacturing in isolation of the rest of the world. If you want markets, if you need access to resources, then it's also important that we recognize, acknowledge, and build in the interdependency into our work. So on the one hand, the development opportunity in energy transition is acting as a big pull for the developing countries to venture into green manufacturing. At the same time, however, the carbon border adjustment mechanism is a sort of a stick that is also pushing the countries to think about green value chains. Starting in 2026, the carbon adjustment border tax, or CBAM, the measure, or CBAM as it's called more popularly, will require importers to pay for emissions with the goal of preventing carbon leakages. This is, EU is not the only region that is considering this. Similar considerations have started to happen in Canada, and I know that the Prime Minister of Canada will be here tomorrow in India. And it's also under consideration in Australia. So this issue of carbon leakage and low emission products for exports is going to become a core issue. The topic for this panel is how green manufacturing and sustainable trade can build value for Global South, thereby advancing the intertwined objectives of climate mitigation and resilience and achievement of sustainable development goals. Specifically, we will examine pathways for the Global South to lead equitable transitions that benefit their national and people development goals. We have an illustrious panel. It's a gender-balanced panel today. Without further ado, I will turn to the first speaker, Shreyas Shende, who will provide a very brief summary. Shreyas, please only use 6 minutes to frame our discussion. Shreyas is a senior research associate at the Net Zero Industrial Policy Lab at the Johns Hopkins University in Washington, D.C. He represents the generation that will shape the shared future of our planet. Over to you, Shreyas. Please come to the podium. You can do it from here.
Hello. Hi. I just want to take the opportunity to firstly thank the TERI team. They have done an incredible job of putting together these panels, making sure everything is run smoothly, and for extending an invitation. Also very thankful to our supporters, including Ms. Paul and the Sequoia team, for supporting our work and making what we do happen. Very briefly, the Net Zero Industrial Policy Lab at Johns Hopkins combines the technical analysis of clean energy supply chains with the study of net zero industrial policy, policies. We want to work with governments, scholars, firms to try and figure out where are there opportunities across the clean energy economy. The lab is founded in 2022, works across 3 research streams, including an industrial-based team, of which I will sort of speak about in a second, but also regional teams where the focus is on Brazil, India, and Mexico, and a global engagement team working with UNIDO, UNFCCC, UNCAT, and I'm very happy to share that Net Zero was one of the signatories for the Bellum Declaration on Global Green Industrialization. What does the industrial-based team work on? We know that industrial policy and strategies can help economies to grow, but there are 3 distinct ways in which we've mapped that industrial policies and strategies can help. The first is they can reduce costs of clean technology, they can lock in decarbonization pathways, and they can also position economies into global clean tech supply chains. What the lab has done is built this tool called the Clean Industrial Capabilities Explorer, which is basically a compass, freely accessible, open to everyone, that helps determine strengths and weaknesses in the clean economy. The lab has taken 10 clean technologies, broken down the supply and process chain. For instance, with solar, how do you convert polysilicon into a module? And what are the critical machineries, capital goods that enable that transformation? And using that analysis, we fed it into a machine learning model that basically spat out this result that said that underlying every single clean technology, there are 5 sets of core capabilities that determine what drives competitiveness. And this is chemicals, electronics, industrial materials, machinery, and metals. For anyone who's in the solar manufacturing space, you would understand that a solar module is nothing but sort of a semiconductor sandwich between glass, and that needs some expertise in chemicals. This is what our lab sort of intuitively determined using UN Comtrade data and more than 150 data points that were fed into this machine learning model. And the Clean Industrial Capabilities Explorer, the key takeaways for us was, in addition to identifying what these 5 core capabilities are, it also teaches us that countries should build on their strengths without being bound to the status quo. They should not every single country should be competing in every single clean technologies. There are certain advantages that countries can play to. And finally, sophisticated and adaptive policy mixes for the local context is what is the need of the hour. I'll very quickly talk about some of the results that we found for countries in the global south. India does surprisingly well across solar, wind, but also transmission, which is an interesting finding given the grid challenges that we are facing right now. Similarly, Mexico has really benefited from its integration into the North American supply chain and does tremendously in transmission and heat pumps. South Africa is lacking on most clean technologies, but does pretty well on biofuels and magnets and so on and so forth. I don't have the opportunity to take this audience through the tool, but please find me after this session. I'm very happy to share the tool, take you through its findings, and answer any and every question that you have. And I'm really looking forward to this panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shreyas. The tool provided some very counterintuitive results. And that is what the value of it is, that countries may not deem themselves as having the competencies to do certain green manufacturing, or they may deem themselves to have that. But when you go through such a structured methodology, what you find is, okay, this is where I need to concentrate my limited capital and attention in order to really come out a winner. With that, let me invite the panelists to please come and join us here at the podium. Dr. Sangeeta Kasturi, Mr. Michael Walker, Bob Keefe, Dr. Kodama, and Professor Veena. So in this segment, we are going to basically give each of our panelists an opportunity to reflect on what countries in general and countries of the South in particular need to do to really leverage the opportunity that they have in green manufacturing. We'll start with Professor Veena Sehajwala, Scientia Professor at the University of New South Wales, Sydney, born and raised initially in Mumbai. Professor Sahajwala, you are a material scientist and a founding director of Smart Center at your university, the University of New South Wales, Sydney. Your center is pioneering transformations of waste into green materials. You invented polymer injection technology, in other words, green steel, and launched the world's first e-waste, plastics, and green ceramics microfactories. You lead national microcycling research and have received a string of prestigious awards, including in 2025, the Officer of the Order of Australia. We are so proud to have you. So, Professor Sehajwala, my question to you is, what policies, partnerships, and international cooperation models, whether at the level of governments or at the level of industries, will enable Global South countries to build resilient, low-carbon supply chains that benefit their own economies and their people while being win-win for other nations and our planet?
Thanks very much, Seema, for that kind, warm welcome. And I want to also acknowledge and thank the organizers. It's been an absolute privilege to get to meet so many amazing people here at TERI, and would like to certainly acknowledge the DG, Dr. Vibha, Sanjay, Sunil, so many amazing people I've had a chance to get to know over the years. My sort of first example, if I may, Seema, is to talk about, you mentioned green steel, and I think the journey of green steel is an interesting one, and what we learn from that is partnership is absolutely critical. So when we started out doing this work, the partnership there had to be with, of course, local industries, but the other important question was that we needed to be able to do all the fundamental science. Without that foundational science, you couldn't actually expect any industry partner to simply take the technology up. So we're grateful that the Australian Research Council, so that's ARC, the funding that we got in the early days of developing that science was absolutely critical. But it's not as if we sort of just waited around and said, well, we'll do the science and then we'll worry about the technology deployment. What we did at the same time was building that partnership with businesses. So that was a critical element of the science and its translation, and the ability to actually take that out into the real world meant that you were actually looking at how data from the labs and what you learn from the labs actually showed the kinds of benefits in real world application. So that was important. And of course, in many instances, when we talk about new science and new technology, we can't forget the fact that even developing methodologies scientifically and technologically is something you have to do. There's no such thing as a standard textbook answer to say, here's how you go about doing it. So that was an interesting point for us. For those who are interested, we're more than happy to kind of show you the kinds of videos that we had to generate to be able to make that visual impact. Seeing is believing. We had to make that happen. We had to have data coming out that showed the benefits. And it wasn't just saying, oh, look, here's fabulous science. We've translated it, therefore we're good to go. It had to be coupled with actual industrial data. And that was the critical part of what we were able to do in partnership. So when we talk about what is an essential sort of, nice combination of looking at these solutions in a holistic way, it's got to be around how in a systems approach, you can think about it. So you don't just think about the fact that, okay, well, I've got to do circular economy, or I've got to worry about decarbonization. Therefore, I'll think about what kind of alternative resources are needed. So yes, in our case with green steel, our technology, polymer injection, looks at use of materials like polymers, and we inject those into electric arc furnaces. But more importantly, we had to answer the question, what does it mean for a steel maker? If I'm a steel maker, whether I'm in India, whether I'm in Australia, it doesn't matter. I need to be absolutely sure that the technology delivers benefits for me. And of course, this is why the work has to be holistic. It has to look at supply chains, materials coming in through the system, and of course, the actual impact when it comes to lowering our carbon footprint. So with hydrogen, what we have demonstrated is that as these materials are injected into the steelmaking furnace, they actually liberate, under the right scientific conditions, hydrogen molecules that then get utilized in the process of making steel. So all of this, yes, one can summarize that in a few minutes, but as you can imagine, the scientific pathway, which of course goes without saying, you've got to have the usual, peer-reviewed papers, the science has to be, proven and published and so on and so forth. So I would probably say that in addition to doing the science, the industrial data, which again, there's a lot of this work that's been published. So if anyone's interested, have a look at how much we have lowered in terms of, actual consumption of carbon products in the system. So when people talk about this kind of work, you have to be able to say, but did you actually see the outcomes in an actual industrial scale production? So that's the question, and the answer is yes, there's a lot of data and information that we have published in addition to science, but the parallels between science and technological advances have to be proven. And this is where, of course, the role of policymakers working with industry, working with researchers is so critical. So I do want to acknowledge the fact that, in Australia, the support that we get through our Australian government, research funding agencies, and of course, Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment, all of that is important because it allows our researchers to not just look at and understand the role of technology and how we might advance technologies, but also look at supply chains, look at how these materials can become part of the supply chain. And indeed, what we are really thrilled, of course, is we've been working towards a partnership here in India with JSW. So we are thrilled that JSW Steel has, been super excited about what this work means for all of us. And as we can imagine, the impact of something like that in decarbonization and bringing new technologies to the forefront and really deploying that is going to make a huge difference to the world. I think, to me, that's got to be a win-win outcome, both from an environmental point of view as well as from an economic point of view. And that perspective is what we're looking at. How do these things make economic sense so that when policymakers come into play and look at what supply chain sort of elements and frameworks need to be set up, we need to take all of that into account. But I couldn't go past kind of sharing with you, as I did earlier when we were chatting. These are our green ceramic tiles. They're made in a microfactory in Liverpool, in Sydney. So if people kind of go, how can you have a microfactory? Does it actually make real life products? The short answer is yes, and I'm holding them in my hands. And yes, they do come in bigger sizes. They go into floor tiles. And the reason why I'm really excited about that is, Liverpool City Council, as an example of a local government in Sydney, has been so passionate about the fact that we can incorporate recycled content like waste glass and waste textiles, and not just saying, well, it's nice because we're recycling, end-of-life materials. I think, to me, more importantly, it is fabulous because it meets the technical and the engineering expectations of what this product should do. So yeah, if you're talking about putting into flooring application, performance is important, like any other product would. So basically, the point I wanted to make out of all of that, it's got to be a collaboration that shows how you can take materials, bring that materials and its intersectionality into the world of real world applications where we all have a role to play. It's got to be a win-win outcome that brings together industry, researchers, government agencies, and those policymakers that need to, in a holistic way, understand what will it take for the world to actually move into a whole new conversation. And we're really excited about the collaborations here. One last point before I sort of finish off is to make the point that when we talk about research and how we tell the story of research and policymakers collaborating, there is Cambridge Materials, and there's some information on your table, has now launched a whole new series of journals. And in there, Cambridge Materials, one of the series is on circularity. I would encourage anybody in the world of policy, industry, research, to think about how your work can inspire the rest of the world. So it's a great opportunity to actually, think about how you might contribute. As someone said to us just yesterday, I've got all this fabulous work sitting in my laptop. And I said to them, I think now's the time to take that amazing work and inspire the rest of the world. So I hope this is really what I'm looking forward to a few days here, is to be inspired. So thank you. Thanks very much, Seema.
Thank you
very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Sahajwala, for your contributions to global society and to this panel as well. With that, let me turn to Dr. Sangeeta Kasturi, Advisor and Scientist, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Government of India. Dr. Kasturi, you are heading the Research and Development and Human Resources divisions in your ministry. You also hold the additional charge of Director of Sardar Swaran Singh National Institute of Bioenergy. You have been a pivotal figure in advancing renewable energy, including bioenergy and hydropower programs. Dr. Kasturi, from your vantage point as a government official, what would you say a government needs to do to translate research and innovation into actual manufacturing of green technologies and do so at scale? Many countries in the South are struggling as extractive economies that export raw materials or inputs. How can they become productive economies that export green technologies? Using an example from India or elsewhere, can you speak to what countries in the South could or should do? Thank you.
Thank you, Seema. And first of all, my compliments to Terry and WSDS organization for this special edition. As most of you are aware that India has remarkably progressed in the renewable energy sector. So we have almost reached to 272 gigawatt of the capacity, installed capacity, non-fossil based. And their solar is leading with 140 gigawatt, around 140 gigawatt, and followed by wind, then hydro, bio, and also we are also looking forward for the geothermal energy that coming into space. You're talking about this, when we talk about biomanufacturing or manufacturing, we also, as you have mentioned, we need to have our own supply chain mechanism. All machine, chemicals, everything should be made in there so that our dependency is reduced. So their government has initiative on these R&Ds. Basically, we have been supporting R&D. Government has specially taken change that. We need to link it, the R&D with the industrial R&D. That is very important. So here, if they come in the consortia mode, even startups or industries, if they come together and do innovation, it's not for innovation, how this can be translated into the products and technologies, and even chemicals and all these supplied, everything together. For example, the solar cells, right from the silicon, can we also go for the next generation solar cells? So we are looking beyond that, so we should have that capabilities. So India is looking at strengthening those capabilities, how we can do these advanced technologies in RE sector. Geothermal also, as mentioned, we have recently, last year in September, we announced geothermal policy. There also, we are directly, assessment is already done for the geothermal energy, but we are also looking at the technologies, what are the advanced technologies? Even though some resources are available, can we also do that engineered geothermal technologies? So those kind of advanced technology we are looking at. Bioenergy, I can talk about almost because I have been doing, promoting the research for almost decade. So I can talk a lot about that. In there, we have a surplus biomass available. It's almost 230 million metric tons of biomass is available in the country. And there is a potential of almost 42 gigawatt energy can be produced. We have reached to 12 gigawatt as of today, but we can do wonders. And going forward for how we can add value to the biomass so that the biomass is sustainably used, that is also one point we can look at that. Carbon capture, there also how we can form e-fuels, those options are there. Hydrogen, National Green Hydrogen Mission, which again India is Ministry of New and Renewable Energy is leading. There it plays very important role in greening the industries, how industries can decarbonize. So ministry is working with other ministries and how this can be applied to the various industries, and for example, shipping, steel, coal, all these sectors. That is another aspect we are looking at. Your point about the supply chain, yes, there is a lot of opportunities for the India to become a global hub with respect to the South, global South. So all these, whatever products are developed in India, for example, solar pump and all those things, off-grid products, so those can be supplied. Considering the resource available at the global South, India can become a good can lead as a supplier for in these specific areas of these renewable energy sector. That is what we are looking at. And we look forward for industry collaboration and international collaboration for the supply chain. it has diversifying the supply chain that is the key for the India, and we would be able to succeed in that to reach the goals by 2030, 500 gigawatt, and to develop India by 2047, which our Honorable Prime Minister has given a vision for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. So in the speakers lounge, we were having a discussion, Dr. Kasturi and I made an observation that sometimes I find that people who are working in the trenches on renewable energy, they are making the case for clean energy, renewable energy basis cost, which is a major achievement, that now renewable energy, even with grid battery, has become very competitive with other technologies, in fact, lower cost. So that even distribution utilities have started saying, we want renewable. It's a very momentous time in India. And to arrive at this point, it has been a big struggle. But I think that, the important point here is that now we can leverage this low-cost energy to manufacture low-cost ammonia, green ammonia, to manufacture low-cost green hydrogen. And there's a green hydrogen mission in your ministry. And we can manufacture, therefore, potentially low-cost green steel. There's an analysis that Berkeley University has done recently, which shows that India's green steel will be highly competitive economically. And then, maybe manufacturing green steel is something we are still playing on the back foot or a defense strategy because of CBAM coming at us. But there is so much opportunity in green that actually, the future supply chains are going to be green supply chains. What the markets will value in terms of competitiveness is not just going to be your cost, it's also going to be your carbon footprint and your ability to demonstrate where the inputs were sourced, and your ability to show with data that they are low emission products. So low emission is going to become part of your competitiveness, and to understand this whole value chain is how we link clean energy with Viksit Bharat. This is where net zero and Viksit Bharat actually come together. And I think that the government has really started to internalize this in a very significant way, as was evident when the Niti Aayog released its pathways analysis for India's Viksit Bharat and net zero goals. And with that, do you want to make any remark around that? Otherwise, I will turn to our next speaker. Okay. So let me turn to Dr. Yoshinori Kodama. Sorry. Yoshinori Kodama. Dr. Kodama, you are a Principal Fellow, Institute for Global Environmental Strategies in Japan, and Honorary Advisor to the TERI, the host for our conference here. You have held key diplomatic posts across Europe and Asia, including at OECD, NATO, and ASEAN. You hold degrees from Tokyo, Cambridge, and London. Your scholarly work spans across international law, trade, maritime security, and humanitarian publications. You have published in leading international journals. Dr. Kodama, how can countries, especially those in the South, build green manufacturing ecosystems and do so in the current geopolitical climate where international order is in a churn? How can they deal with the uncertainty that surrounds them?
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Everybody, good afternoon. Very nice to see you. Sima-san, thank you so much indeed. Such a really, so pretty complimentary, excessive introduction. I'm a mere practitioner. I belong to the Japanese government for a long time in a diplomatic field. So I have to say I'm a layperson in many things, but I try to pretend that I know something. And also currently I belong to the Japanese Institute for Global Strategic Environmental Strategies, which is a sort of brother or sister institute with the TERI. So I do appreciate the long time cooperation between TERI and my institute. Thank you so much indeed. And also this time, such a great hospitality. And also I'm so impressed and so excited. First of all, India. I have to say, you mentioned uncertainty and the turmoil and geopolitical difficulties, but I really want to say India, its presence, and its leadership, and also its sort of influence, the power. This is something remarkable. I met many people here after my arrival. Most of the people say, no, India is still a developing country. GDP per capita is something. But I really want to say, not only its population and gross GDP, but this diplomatic sort of coordinating power or its influence based upon probably your Prime Minister's great leadership and also India's consistency, so sort of tenacity. Probably this is the historical tradition of Indian spirit coming from very famous people like Mahatma Gandhi, I may think, Nehru, and also recently my mentor in Cambridge, Dr. Arunatia Sen, who is a great contributor to the theory of economy and development. So this tradition, I really want to say, India is in a position of great leadership in, I want to say, not only the global South, but a global world, I want to say. So global South is becoming a sort of power and also numbers and also its presence is enormous. But I really want to say that the challenges are the same for us. And also how we tackle challenges. Challenges are many, of course, environment, climate change, biodiversity, and also how we balance trade and environment, and development and environment, trade and development, so many complicated issues. And also geopolitical situation. Yes, indeed, especially after 2022, we are seeing sort of security issues are very linked with economic issues, economic security issues, like, of course, energy, and also food, and also into this environmental aspects. So I really want to see that India, not only the leader of global South, but the leader of global conscience and global democracy, and also global market-based innovative economy. So Japan, my country, we would like to follow, and we like to become a very good partner with India. So from this point of view, how we tackle the issue, and also, Sima-san, you mentioned uncertainty. What we should do against uncertainty. I'm a mere student of international relations. There's one theory. If you have uncertainty, the solution is regime construction, regime making. But this regime is a very wide sort of definition. Probably Johns Hopkins University has a great research of what regime is. Regime is the rules. Regime is the sort of predictability. Regime is the patterns of actions and the way of thinking. So what we need is, again, rules and guidance. And from this point of view, my government and my institute, we consider the Paris Agreement and UNFCCC, of course, and the Paris Agreement, and based upon the Kyoto Protocol. But Paris Agreements drastically change the basic tones, the basic principles of Kyoto Protocol. But the Paris Agreements sort of frameworks and also its a mechanism, something we can put as a sort of basis for consideration. Two things. One is we have heard many things about how we use market mechanism for both presenting a solution to this trade and the environment. One is CBAM. Yes, this is really currently the focus of attention. And I really want to see how very successful India, EU, FTA will take care of this issue or not. So now this successful completion of negotiation between India and the EU is a sort of a world attention. Trade negotiators like us, we are so keen, so curious about how just they manage to resolve or reach some arrangement on this matter. But the one thing is that this sort of trading, carbon trading and carbon pricing. The European Union is currently the leader of the world. But Japan, my country too, we are now starting more sort of, I can say, mainstreaming of carbon trading, emission trading system. From the 1st of April this year, we will introduce European-style cap and trade emission trading market in Tokyo. Currently, we have a voluntary carbon trading and emission trading system. But following the EU and the United Kingdom, their mechanism, we will start on the 1st of April this year, compulsory cap and trade emission trading system in Tokyo. Two things I really want to add. One is this system mechanism should be in harmony with sort of private sectors, companies' own innovative initiatives. So it shouldn't become a sort of burden on private sector and companies. And the other thing is that this is a market mechanism. So we have to be always careful about sort of uncontrollable, explosive sort of dynamics of market. We have to be careful of speculative, for instance, use of this market. So how we construct this regime, so carbon trade market, this is a challenge for us. But we would like to discuss with other like-minded countries, like-minded entities like EU and India and others, how we proceed with this. Second thing, this part is more something in harmony with what Japan and India have been doing. That is, this is also from Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. That is a joint crediting mechanism. The acronym is JCM. JCM is a sort of corporation-based bilateral scheme. So basically, it's a business-to-business corporation for environmental goals. At the same time, trade and industry. But we need these two things. Of course, one is technology, the other financing, and both of them. This scheme really respect or based itself upon private initiative, but at the same time, their sort of project, their business corporation are sort of credited, sort of environmental sort of carbon credit, and that will be incorporated into sort of government-based achievements of sort of crediting, which means that will contribute to the climate change sort of mitigation, you can say. So, ladies and gentlemen, already so many Indian companies which are interested in joining in this JCM mechanism. And this week, I myself humbly, I signed with the Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industries about the implementation of this JCM schemes. Last year, Japanese ambassador here in India and his counterparts signed the partnership agreement, also memorandum between Japan and India for this JCM schemes. So I do hope just this JCM will create one model along with this market-based trading mechanism. So these are something my government and my institute would like to follow up. I have many things beyond that. Can I just limit myself here? There are issues of critical minerals. There are issues of synergy with biodiversity, others. But these are something I can mention later if there's any discussion about this. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's great to hear, what I've taken away from what you said is that even though the international system may be under strain right now, there are still agreements and mechanisms like the Kyoto Protocol and the Article 6 under the Kyoto Protocol, where countries can come together and have positive exchanges like the one between Japan and India, where Japan will be providing India technologies which are going to be carbon abating, which will obviously the carbon abatement credit will go to Japan, but India will have a development opportunity in developing its green value chains. So I love that example. You want to quickly remark?
Kyoto Protocol credit was only for sort of providers.
Sorry?
So under the Kyoto Protocol, so credits, so under the Kyoto Code, there was a clean energy development mechanism. The credit was sort of granted only for sort of provider suppliers, which means Japan. But under the Paris Agreement, that will be equally, so evenly,
see. The
although
emissions
shared
credit
with
will be
India.
shared.
Yes,
Okay.
emission credits.
Thank you for correcting me. That's
So
even
these are
wonderful.
really
It's
win-win.
even more
yeah,
wonderful.
Win-win, win-win corporate.
So there are very positive opportunities
exactly,
that still exist in the global ecosystem, one of them being this. Thank you for that insight. Let me turn to Bob Keefe. Bob, you are the Executive Director of E2, a US-based organization representing over 11,000 business leaders advocating for pro-economy and pro-environmental policies. Recognized by Time magazine as one of the world's most influential climate leaders, you speak regularly on economic costs of climate change and economic benefits of clean energy. You have authored 2 books, Climateonomics and Clean Economy Now, and previously you spent 2 decades as a journalist. Bob, please tell us how civil society should think about building the political economy that would provide sustained support to a green economy. Even as global South countries are increasingly attracted to and working on the potential of green manufacturing and green trade, they are still some ways away from embracing green growth fully, in the sense that they are not treating it as the model for their future development. What do you think is the reason for the hesitation in embracing clean and green as the only future growth model? Do you see trade-offs between pursuing the business as usual versus green model? Or is it that these countries are worried about how to deal with the existing legacy infrastructure that is not green, and therefore they don't want to embrace green narratives that may raise expectations they cannot fulfill in the near term? The old infrastructure provides jobs that cannot be replaced by green infrastructure immediately. Moreover, a country like India is adding more and more youth to the workforce every year, and they need to be employed. Please, could we benefit from your insights?
Small question, huh? Seema, thank you.
But you have first-hand experience.
Seema, thank you so much. And thanks to Terry for, what a fantastic conference. And thank you all for being here and taking the time out of your day to listen to us. I'm grateful and I'm honored and to be with such an august panel up here as well. So thank you. Seema, I think at the core of the question is really the question of creating durable policy, creating durable political policy to advance clean energy, green energy, and a more sustainable economy. And as you know, I don't know if you've heard this, but durable policy is a thing that we're having a problem with in the United States right now. And as a matter of fact, Mike and I were joking backstage. We're thinking that one of the reasons that we were invited to speak on this is because we were the only Americans willing to show our faces in a global climate summit. So thank you for welcoming us here. A lot of us are still moving in the right direction. I promise you that. But we're talking about building durable political support. And if you hear and watch what's happening in the United States right now, the discussion, the controversy isn't about jobs. Everybody still wants jobs. Everybody still wants economic growth. Everybody still wants investments. Everybody still wants, including the occupant of the White House, still wants to be competitive on the global marketplace. So to me, I think that really the key in creating durable political policy to keep clean energy and a cleaner economy growing is to change the way we talk about it. We have to change the narrative around climate change. We've spent 40 plus years talking about climate change in terms of parts per million, polar bears, SOx, NOx, et cetera, all important things, obviously. But we have to start talking about what it is now, the clean economy. We're talking about jobs, investments, driving economic growth. I was interested to see in the hall out there when I was walking in a photograph of Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, who spoke here, I don't know, 20 years ago or something like that. Governor Schwarzenegger, the governator, as we call him in California, We got to know him very well at my organization, E2, over the years for our work in California on the Global Warming Solutions Act, 20 years ago, the first ever greenhouse gas emission standards for vehicles, the California Clean Car Standards, so forth. Governor Schwarzenegger was good enough to write the foreword in my last book. And what the governor would say here is, Bob, you cannot talk about climate change. You have to talk about the pollution, talk about jobs, talk about the economy. And that's what we do. That's what we've done. That's how we were able to pass those policies in California and landmark policies in the United States previously as well. But talking about the economic benefits of climate action and frankly, the economic costs of climate change, which we all know is getting to be, unfortunately, an easier story to tell with every day and every hurricane and every cyclone and every heat wave across the planet. But what we know now is that in America, there are 3.5 million people who now work in clean energy. These aren't climate workers. These are electricians. These are plumbers. These are HVAC technicians. They're energy efficiency construction workers that are making our buildings more efficient. They're factory workers who are building more energy efficient appliances and electric vehicles and now batteries and electrolyzers and all of these things. These are working people. And this is not just the green economy or the clean economy, it is the economy. When you look at the energy industry right now, and we've all seen the numbers, 90% plus of all energy that's going on the grid right now comes from solar, wind, batteries, and other renewable sources. Clean energy is the energy market right now. And that's how we need to start talking about these things. And when we do, it's hard for lawmakers, for policymakers to object because they want those jobs in their communities, in their regions, in their states, in their congressional districts. So when I go to Washington again in a couple of weeks, I'll be bringing 25 or 30 of our E2 members from around the country meeting with Republican lawmakers, and this is exactly the type of thing that we'll be talking about. Now, we also know what happens if policy is not durable, because we're living that nightmare, frankly, in the United States right now. 4 years ago, when the Biden administration passed what was the biggest climate policy in the history of the planet, I believe, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, the package that included the CHIPS Act at the time. Since then, we've seen companies invest more than $130 billion in more than 400 major clean energy factories and projects in America. 130,000 jobs announced, solar panel factories, wind turbine factories, electric vehicle battery factories. The majority of those, by the way, were foreign investments that came from places including India that was building, that had announced solar panel factories in places like Colorado and in the Carolinas. We also know that since we've completely gone backwards on clean energy and climate policy in America, what's happened? And what's happened is in the past year alone, companies have canceled at least 65 of those projects. This is something that my organization has been tracking very closely, and you can find it at e2.org, and in the book. But companies have canceled 60 to 80 of those projects already. $30 billion worth of investments has been pulled out of the United States. 30,000 jobs have been canceled. Why? This is a policy change. This is a policy swing. Are we still moving in the right direction? Yes, because we still have, nobody can deny the fact now that clean energy is the cheapest power you can build. Solar, batteries, wind, and utilities are not building more solar, batteries, wind because they care about polar bears or parts per million. Let me tell you that. It's because they care about profits, and they have to be responsible to their shareholders. This isn't a bad thing. This is a good thing because it's how we're going to shift this narrative and create more durable policy, I think. And then lastly, to your point about the youth and young people. Obviously, there's nobody that has more at stake right now than young people. And I'm holding my phone here and looking at it, not because I'm looking at TikTok, because I'm trying to be young and look at my notes here, just for the record, like the young folks do. But nobody has more at stake than young people, not just from an environmental perspective, but also from this economic perspective. The number of jobs that we're creating right now, that we're able to create here in India and elsewhere through clean energy, is just simply, as you mentioned, unprecedented. We're at an unprecedented transition. And if we don't let politics, we don't let policy get in the way, we're going to keep moving in the right direction.
Thank you. Thank you for those remarks. Let me turn to Michael. Michael, you're the business leader on our panel. Since 2019, you are the Chief Executive Officer of Stacks, where you have overseen the development of multiple barge systems and led product commercialization, marketing, contracting, and accounting functions. With over 2 decades in operations and leadership, Michael, you have guided companies from early stage development to successful integration in environmental infrastructure markets. So the question for you, Michael, is from your vantage point as an industry leader, what have you heard from our illustrious speakers so far that has resonated with you? Specifically, could you speak to how countries in the global south can turn the need to advance low carbon trade from a compliance cost into a competitive edge in order to gain market share? If you can share specific examples from your experience, it would be great. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you for the introduction. And it's an honor to be part of this distinguished panel. And I'll echo Bob's comments. Thank you to everyone in the crowd here today. It takes all of us together pushing forward to get this sustainable agenda done. And we're grateful for it. I know it's a long push, but we're going to get there. I'm going to speak specifically to maritime and the supply chain. And there's some real challenges going on. I think it was mentioned beforehand with regard to the changes in regulations, the recent United States exit from all things carbon. But what we do see is we understand what the end game looks like for shipping. We understand ports that are filled with vessels coming in with alternative fuels. We see vessels fueled by traditional fuels with carbon capture systems on board. We see ports with carbon capture systems for other technologies. And we basically, in the end, see a rich program that has zero emissions. And it's there. It might be 20, 30 years out, but it's there. And that's really encouraging. The challenge for us right now is how do we navigate that? How do we get from here to there? Because we can't just say, oh, we're going to get there in 20, 30 years and be like, there's a lot of emissions between now and then. And so I think it's really interesting. We have this opportunity, and I think it's an opportunity to innovate and find alternative solutions. And I would say this, that I wouldn't be discouraged by the fact that there are some icebergs between there and now. I would be encouraged about the opportunity that it presents. And particularly for India, I think India has a real opportunity here to innovate. And I can give you a little bit of perhaps maybe the roadmap, at least what we saw in California. And it was led by Governor Schwarzenegger and policymakers like Bob, who realized that after 30 years of addressing the auto industry emissions, that they needed to start to look at the largest polluter in the state, and that was our ports. And now, if you look at it, an average vessel while it's at berth produces somewhere around 40 to 50,000 cars worth of emissions a day. It's shocking, I didn't know this, but that's an incredible number, right? And you think about how many ports, how many vessels are in port and how many days a year, it's just a phenomenal number. And the tragedy of it is that those emissions, the PM 2.5s and the NOx, they fall on our most disadvantaged communities. So you have increased cancer, increased heart disease, increased asthma. And so there's a real tangible cost to this. And what California Air Resource Board did, they said, we're going to solve this. And we're going to solve it in a way that's going to allow for innovation. We're going to put forth a regulation that requires people either to shore power, which is plug in, I think everybody knows what that is, and or you can use an alternative emission capture system. But we're not going to define what that looks like. We're just going to tell you that those are your two options. And if you don't do those options, there'll be a stiff penalty, an hourly rate. And what happened out of this was you had a bunch of infrastructure spend on shore power, which today that really isn't a viable solution or a pathway given that every electron out there is chasing data centers or other areas at the port where electrification is going to produce better results. And then you had this pool of innovation that happened. All these people came together and said, hey, we're going to solve this problem on the emission capture piece. And it resulted in several companies that came forth with solutions that reduce PM 2.5 by 99%, reduce NOx by 95%, and hit the regulation. And that's where Stacks, our company, came from. We ultimately came through this channel and now have 8 barges in operation on our way to 20. We'll treat 30,000 hours of emission capture. That's the equivalent of 62 million cars that are off the road. This year we'll do 50,000. And next year we'll do 100,000 hours of emission capture. And what also came out of this was further innovation, right? We're talking about carbon. I know that's a big driver here. We always say it's pollutants that kill today and carbon that kills tomorrow, but we need to address both. And so what happened was because of that innovation, because we continued to push, we have demonstrated 3 times now in trials in auto carriers, in container vessels, and in tankers, carbon capture. So we can now take the dirtiest vessel that comes into a port and make it a zero emission solution. So not 20 years from now where we're going to have alternative fuels come in and it's going to be a great story or a battery driven fuel source. We're talking about today we can provide a solution at birth that's zero emission. And I think that as we look to going forward and what those next steps are, because the future is uncertain on how we're going to get to that vision that I put forth, I really think India is at a real critical spot where they can drive innovation for the global south and be a real leader. And there's a tremendous opportunity between now and then. And most definitely there's a tremendous need that we need to address. We can't sit back and say, hey, we're just going to wait, it's going to come around, because that's just not the right approach. And so I'm wildly encouraged about what I've heard today. I think we're all optimists. That's why we're here. We're here to solve problems. And I couldn't be more encouraged about where India is placed with regard to being on the forefront of that.
Thank you. Ms. Sanjwani, you have to leave. You have a pressing government meeting to attend to. So please, I would give you the formal permission to proceed.
Yes.
If
Before
you have
just
to.
leave one point, I just must remind me. When we experienced, all of world experienced COVID pandemic, so that time within 1 year from the DNA isolation to drug delivery, vaccine delivery, that has happened within 1 year. So anything is possible in the science and innovation, that's what. So in this, if we want to avoid the climate pandemic, so we all can work and India can lead and serve for the global south, including the workforce for world talent pool we can create. And now AI is there. So with the help of AI, we can do much more these things in a faster way. So excuse me for that. And thank you so much.
Sure.
I would be very happy to connect if any questions later on. Thank you so much.
So we'll take a couple of questions. I know we are very close to lunch, but if anyone has questions, please raise your hand up and you have an opportunity to hear from our illustrious panelists. Yes, please. Keep it short. Don't make it a commentary. And please tell us who you want to direct the question at.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, I'm trying as loud as possible. My name is Arjun, and I represent 2 companies, Alinergy and Whitespace, as mentioned. We're Singapore-based electronics manufacturer. I'm in the deep end of clean tech manufacturing, renewable energy, green energy production, electronics manufacturing. So I'm seeing the entire spectrum of what it takes to produce at a profit. So the question I have is a very simple one. What's the economic case, especially when you look at circular economy, recycling? I have spent some time in electronics recycling in the past with companies abroad as well. the deterrent is typically the material recovery is let's say at a lower value than the cost of recovering that material, which means the costs are greater than the recovery, and that's a major deterrent to the business case of circular economy. So what are your experiences from Australia, from the US, and other countries where India can look at adopting some of these good ideas, where we improve the business case for a circular economy and a recycling based ecosystem, especially when you look at critical minerals such as polysilicon, components such as precious metals, and those which get recovered from, let's say, semiconductors or solar PV or data center equipment, for example, going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Veena, you want to take that?
Yeah, happy to take that. Thank you so much for that question. I think the short answer is the opportunities are tremendous. For one myth that I can bust right there, which you're sort of assuming that the cost of recovery is far exceeding the inherent value. That's not quite the case from what we're developing and what we're seeing, because I think, again, the assumption is that you've got sort of old-fashioned technologies that have to be deployed for materials recovery. And my point is the kinds of innovation that are coming through. I mean, some of the examples of what we're developing with our microfactories, for instance, in all of these cases, what we're really looking at is how you might be able to innovate when it comes to actually developing practical real-world solutions and having these factories and these microfactories, and we've obviously deployed some of them, having it close to where your source of end-of-life products is, or whatever that waste is. But that circular economy piece absolutely has to make sense, because the quality of what you can then extract, so if you're talking about solar PV, for example, what's the quality of that silicon? How can you actually extract that? You're talking about batteries, well, what's the quality of that metal alloy? Whether you're talking about things like cobalt, can you actually recover that metal? And is that metal recovery at the right quality so that it can become part of the supply chain? So that if you imagine a situation in India where you're actually enabling that metals recovery, which then becomes part of the supply chain. So if somebody wants to be able to set up new manufacturing capacity with making cells and so on right here and manufacturing batteries, you've actually created that ecosystem so that you can take end-of-life materials, recovered metals, produce them at high quality. And so it's the kinds of materials that you need in the making of electrodes, for instance. If you're talking about what kind of metal oxides do you need. I know I'm getting into a lot of that nitty-gritty detail, but the point is, the devil is in the detail, right? Like, you need to be able to produce quality materials that have to perform at a competitive level. So when we talk about circular economy, the way you monetize it is by demonstrating that not only have you recovered it, and yes, it's got to be cost effective, but does it meet the expectation of any manufacturer, because it actually meets performance guarantees. And that's really the holistic question that we're obviously working on. So the short answer is absolutely doable. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to perhaps look at potential opportunities in India, like we're doing in Australia as well.
Thank you. Is there another question? Otherwise, we'll move to the key takeaways. Was there another question?
Over there.
Yes, please. You're not audible.
Yeah, hi. Really great points made here. I took a couple of points. I have one question, right? I'm trying to push beyond science here to understand from the commercial bottleneck standpoint, right? When we're talking about micro factories, right, what is the single most supply chain intervention, that you think will really bring about that kind of circular change? Or because see, when you're doing something at pilot, it's really easy to implement in factories. But when you move to mainstream and to scale, that's when the challenge really comes about, right? So what do you think, or in your opinion, is that one single most intervention that needs to come by?
Yeah, look, again, a really good question. I would say from our experience in Australia, in the different kinds of microfactories that we're building with multiple industry partners, obviously support of government and so on, I think what we need to be able to be mindful that you need to go right at the source where the waste feedstock is. So imagine a local government, right? So we're working with local government. The example of these green ceramic tiles that I was giving is literally where the local government is in fact managing supplies of feedstock. So you're not just kind of going, well, somebody else will worry about it, we'll just dump it, and some other kind of magic system will emerge. I think we've got to ask the tough questions. What's the value in that feedstock right there and then? So if you're to take that example of battery that I was giving earlier, we're working with partners that basically allow us to say, here are the different kinds of batteries. Let's go right where the source is. I mean, you can think about this as, right? I mean, people refer to it as urban mining and all of these different kind of phrases that are coming out. But the potential to monetize that will only happen when all the pieces of the supply chain can work together. So if you've actually got the ability to say that waste feedstock from local governments, so for example, our local councils that collect waste are actually saying, let's make sure we manage it to the point where it goes into a remanufacturing process. So it's not about saying somebody else's problem, but rather can we put that into a remanufacturing process? So one becomes the supply end of it. It's no different to any other resource being sold to a manufacturer. And then the end user knows exactly what they're getting in terms of quality of that feedstock. So I would say it's very important to talk about us managing quality of what's coming into a microfactory. And absolutely, the scalability question is there. These are basically able to be replicated. So the way we scale it up, very agile, very fast. This particular microfactory in Liverpool, we've got it up and running in 6 months, and in no time we'll be able to add more modules. So we can build up that scale very quickly by replicating that. And the point is you can actually put that microfactory down closer and closer to where your feedstock is available. So that makes economic sense to do so. And that's exactly what we're doing in Australia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I invite Dhaval Nigandi? He's an economist who works at Sequoia Climate Foundation to summarize the key takeaways.
Thank you, Seema. So this has been a very, very rich discussion, and I'm not going to summarize it, but I'm going to share my key takeaways. So first, I think this green manufacturing and trade provides a real opportunity to change the narrative around climate action, not from an environmental duty, which has been until now, to an economic necessity that is going to be good for local economies to create jobs. The second is that I think this is also a real opportunity for Global South to think about mechanisms such as CBAM, not from a compliance perspective, but as a real opportunity to build a competitive advantage, because that's where the future lies. The third takeaway for me was that as countries think about green products, it is really important for them to prioritize and think where their strengths lie. You'll not be able to do everything, and using tools such as what Shreyas mentioned would really give you an advantage to prioritize and build your skills there. And then I think the common theme that I heard across is collaboration is going to be really important between the research to really have science that is not just technical, but also meets the technical specifications around what's out in there in the world, between the industry, and that should not happen after all the science has been done, but to do that in parallel so that there's a two-way exchange, and the policies that can enable both of them. So that's what my key takeaways would be from this rich discussion. Thank you all for joining, and let me hand it over to Seema.
Thank you very much for being our audience today. Without you, there would be no panel. And my sincere thanks to the illustrious panelists You've brought so much wealth of wisdom to the discussion, and I'm sure that it will only increase the passion of this group of people to take the agenda forward. It is the agenda of our times. It behoves all of us to work as solution providers. So thank you for your participation, all of you. Thank you.
For a group photograph. May I request everyone to join the conversation online using our official hashtags, hashtag WSDS 2026 and hashtag Act for Earth, and help us amplify the message of this summit. We also invite you to visit the Terra Zone at Shah Jahan Hall to experience Him Connect, Himalayan Innovation Mela, an initiative of the MOEFCC, showcasing inspiring innovations from India's Himalayan regions, focus on ecological security and sustainable socio-economic development. Do take the time to explore the partner and Terry stalls as well. We may all now proceed for lunch at Raja Bagh. We will begin the next session here at 2:30 p.m. on Future Tech for People, Planet and Prosperity. Thank you all.